Welcome to Women Winning It Writing Podcast Show. I am your host, Chelsea McCoy, and this is the show where we talk about all things writing and all things editing from a woman's perspective. This show is brought to you by Your Writing Table, where we help you tell your story your way in your words. This show has been developed to discuss the behind the scenes of the book writing journey and the writer's experience. We talk about a range of things from what inspired you to write your book, what your writing process was like, mainly your experience writer's block. And of course, we talk about editing experiences. We give out some tips, tools, strategies, and so much more. Our goal is to provide inspiration, motivation, encouragement, and to break down the myth that writing a book is impossible. And now let's get into today's episode. As creatives, our brains work a little bit different than our analytical, logical sisters and brothers. And so we see the world from a different perspective. Sometimes I've had writers say that, when I ask them what inspired them to become a writer, they tell me it was just in them, like it was just in their soul. It was something they had to do. And so our guest today is going to talk to us about that. When you have to answer that call to writing, when it just literally pulls at you. She is an author, she's a playwright, she's a scholar. The name of her book is The Universal Grammar of Story. She's going to talk with us about it today and answering the call to write. So without further ado, please help me welcome our guest, Dr. Hazel Denhart, to the show. Hello, Hazel.
Hello. Good to be here today.
Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you. And we are so excited. I'm ready to just dive in because your book has just really intrigued me and it fits into so many of the things that we talk about on the show. So please let's just dive right in. Tell us about yourself and your book and your writing journey.
Oh, myself. Well, I have a beginning of life that really didn't fit what one would expect of a writer. I'm a very late bloomer, really, when it comes to writing. I didn't get started into literature until late in my 20s. And so I always wanted to write. I mean, it was always in my mind. I had a fantasy every minute of the day, some story trying to unfold within me. But I didn't know how to engage with the printed world, and I didn't live in a time of technology like we have now, when you can just hit a record button and record at your desires at the great moment. So I was slow to come to writing, but you know something, writing is it's a destiny, it's not a choice. And even if you're someone like me who didn't start off with the skills or in a position to write well, it'll find you one way or another in time.
I agree. I definitely agree. And so, again, not only are you an author, but you're a playwright, you're a scholar, and a lecturer. So, out of all of those things, what inspired you to write your book?
Well, I wanted to, when gained literacy, I was in my late 20s, and I wanted to pour these stories that I had onto paper. But I didn't have the resources, I didn't know how to do it, and so I began to study everything I could find on writing. I went back to the very ancient days of writing, to ancient Greece, to writing in different parts of the world, and I pulled out as much as I could to give me a guide. I was trying to write my own guide on how to write, and that turned into eventually a master's thesis, comparing the different types of writing advice through the ages, and that turned into the universal grammar of story. And sometimes that title throws people off because they think, oh, this is a grammar book, but not at all. It's a metaphor. It's that what we have within us as writers, we have natural logic and emotion and intuition that comes together to form a book. And the way that forms is the way language forms. It's got certain rules that are uh, so there are certain rules that you naturally follow, and if you don't, then your story begins to feel a bit awkward. So the long way around the barn there is I wanted to know how to write, and there was no one around me who could teach me that. So I studied how to write and wrote a guide for myself.
I love that. And sometimes, we have to do that. We just have to take those ideas and just kind of roll with it, right?
No.
And if it's not there, we can create it on our own. And that's, again, that's the creative part that's in us. And so, even in your book, you talk about the personal call and the social call. What are those, and what's the difference between the two?
Well, the personal call, that's struggling through our own psychology. We're trying to resolve something in our own private life. And the idea of a story will come to us the same way that dreams come to us at night from the unconscious mind. And just like we use dreams to try to sort out some kind of a struggle, we use stories. Writers have the wonderful gift of turning those struggles into stories. Now, sometimes when you get a great idea for a story, and you realize what it might be from your personal life, on occasion the story will collapse and you won't be able to write it anymore because you might have solved that personal problem within yourself. But I advise my students never toss those words out because sooner or later they will come back to you. It might be 20 years, but that is the birth of a story that is yet to come. And there's a simple way around overcoming that block in time, and that is the social call. Just as the personal call draws us to make sense out of some chaos in our life, the social call asks us to help us make sense out of the moment of struggle in our society. And although we have all kinds of struggles within the world of when you look at art as a whole, you can distill it to one thing that the society is trying to work through. There's lots of sub things, but there's one grand theme. And in our time, that grand theme is how do we get together? How do we tribe up, retribe? How do we keep a family together or a community together? And we see that in stories now that you'll see a, a, a group of people that will struggle through something that no character, say, in the 1990s would struggle through. You would have an intentional tribe or intentional family formed in those days. You have some television show like, let's say, Friends. But then when you get past the 2000s, you have shows like Arrested Development, where the family will do anything to stay, to hold itself together, even in the midst of this grave dysfunction. Now, that is the social call. How do we pull it together? And the supporting problems or the derivative problems in our society feed into that one grand problem. The divisions we face in any part of the world and, as we struggle in our country now, are all a part of that loss of ability to come together. So the artists of the world come together to form a tapestry of life. Rollo May told us in the 70s, if you want to understand the significance of any era, look at their art. Look at it. What is it saying as one great big mural? And so, artists on a societal level, from the social call, we are joining and answering that question. How do we come back together? How do we come together in the first place? In our society. The personal call, now that's going to differ over time as problems come and go in your life. But the social call, that's going to stay the same. If you don't address it correctly, then you'll lose your audience with the social call. If you don't address it correctly with the personal call, you'll get writer's block. The other way is it's audience block. So
That's good. And I love how you tied in the TV shows because that is so true. And now you're going to make me go back and look at my TV show differently.
yes, yeah.
I love
Well,
it. So
we've lived through three great eras in the Western world, and they're all, defined by modernity. We had pre-modernity, where we lived in very close-knit tribal communities, be it a family or our little village. And then came modernity, where everything was blown away from where things were scattered because of the Industrial Revolution. And we lost that sense of how do we gather into community. And now that changed. These three eras take hundreds of years to rise, reach their peak, and fade away. So we are experiencing right now an extremely rare moment for writers and creative artists because our era of modernity started around early 14 or sorry 15th century, late 1400s, early 15th century, and it began to fade right around the turn of the millennium now. So what worked in the 90s for a television show won't work now because we're just shifting on the other side of that divide. In the world of modernity, writers are trying to teach us, storytellers are trying to teach us, how do we keep our humanity? Because clearly we had lost our humanity. To the many, we mechanized everything in life and stripped the human soul out of it. And that was our big struggle. And it was really epitomized beautifully by Charlie Chaplin when we saw him in modern life, becoming a cog in a machine. It was a wonderful metaphor of how our mentality was becoming machine-like and utterly inhuman in that way. And society has had enough of that. We are breaking down psychologically. We are breaking down emotionally because it is the natural human way to be in community and be in um, easy synergy with one another, and we don't know how to do that anymore. That was lost to us by the Industrial Revolution, and now we're starting to get it back. And as the technologies advance more and more, I think we're gonna see younger and younger generations breaking away from, like, breaking away from things that feel so unnatural because life is becoming exceedingly unnatural right now. But there's so much promise.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
There's so much promise because we crave to be in the company of one another. Americans don't know how to go into a cafe and sit down and talk to a complete stranger, have a great conversation, and then walk away energized.
I do. I can totally do that. And my daughter talks about me. She's like, Mom, do you know that person? No. Then will you, Mom? And I'm like, do you have to know someone just to say a kind word or, to express, hey, the weather's nice outside or, whatever it is. And it's just part of, yeah, it's interacting, it's engaging. That's also, again, for creatives, that could be a story. What happened to the lady I talked to in the parking lot?
That's
And it was so funny because literally we went to the grocery store. It's on Saturday, and my kids were with me, and they had already gone ahead of me, and they were headed to the car with the basket. And so there was a lady. She was coming out of the store at the same time I was. I was looking at my receipt, and she says, "Oh no, go ahead." And I said, "No, no." I said, "I hope the kids." I said, "I hope they just go ahead and leave, and they forget that I'm here." And we started laughing and just talking about our kids, and it was just so funny. And my daughter was like, "Mom, who's that lady?" Just a lady coming out of the grocery store, but there was nothing wrong with having a conversation. And as we were coming out of the parking lot, the lady turned and, in front of us and passed by. And immediately my mind began to create I wonder where she's going. I wonder what the rest of her day is going to consist of.
Oh, yes. Yeah. You see what's happening is, as a creative being, you enjoy the beauty, the sacredness of an encounter with another person, a complete stranger. It is rare and it's so delightful. And then we begin to create that within stories. Writers create these interactions that the rest of society is hungry for. That's your natural impulse.
Yeah, it was so funny. And you and I were actually talking prior to the recording about transitory moments. And that's what that felt like to me.
Right. Yeah. What we were talking about was in in studies of creativity, we're beginning to recognize that our great moments of insight come through when we're done working with whatever work. It might be working at a job all day, or it might have been struggling through some kind of creative project that you've just lost your enthusiasm for, and it's just become work. And then when you're ending that long bout of kind of logical application of your mind, and you turn to do something very simple, something very everyday, like get in the car, jump on the bus, or get on your bicycle, and you've released yourself from that burden, suddenly insight will come. And tends to come all at once. A wonderful, yeah, and you got that when you got in the car and you were leaving.
Definitely. So now what is your writing process like? Whether you're writing a book, whether you're working on a play, maybe writing a speech for a speaking engagement, like what's your process like?
Well, it varies depending on varies depending on the project and what I'm doing. This is often the same. I mean, we all as creative beings have different ways that we approach something. If I'm doing something like a nonfiction book on, well, I say like the writing book, Universal Grammar of Story, I'll sit down and do an outline. I want to do the structure and get it all laid out. Or if I'm writing a story and I can't quite grasp where it's going, I'll lay out an outline of, how is this going to end? This story end? How does it begin? But other times, I just am overcome with thoughts that just stream of consciousness, and that's good too. So just pour those thoughts out and don't let anything interfere with that. Just keep going until you run out of steam. And when you do, then start to order that stuff. Don't belittle any way of approaching your writing, whether it's logical structure or whether it's this wild stream of consciousness. And don't be impatient with yourself if it's not getting where you want it to go. You are having a dance with something beyond yourself and beyond the world. And you can't force that to come on a time schedule any more than you can force a sunflower to open earlier than it's intended to open. I mean, we can do some things, like can run a light all night long in the garden house, but you must let this unfold as it is intending to unfold. Now, you might get to a point where you've got 600 pages of stuff that's chaotic, it goes in circles, and now what? Now you can pick up some of the structure of storytelling and begin to sort out those 600 pages where they belong. Like something's missing, something's trying to repeat within you, or you're not facing something that the story wants you to face. And so you're just running in circles. One of the best things you can do in understanding how your story is to flow is to look at the villain in the story. There's always somebody you don't like. There are no stories if you don't have this individual, this character, and fall in love with that one. Understand how you are that character, how all of us are that character at some point. There's no one on earth that we are not like in some fashion, in some way. Some of us are more disciplined and in control of ourselves than others, but that doesn't mean that we're not tempted toward that kind of cruelty or arrogance, because that's just the nature of human life. So when you get into that character that you don't like and suddenly see the world through that character's eyes, your story will open up to you. And I find it very frustrating because with two of my pieces, the character I liked least turned out to be the hero, the one with the most monumental change, transformation, and the most beautiful story, the the one who would make the audience cry. So this will also help you with the personal call because you're struggling with something and you're unconscious. And when you look at the character you least like, that's the mirror that your dream is trying to tell you about. Have mercy. You don't have to you don't have to acknowledge, you don't, I don't, that's the wrong word. You don't have to condone the ill behavior of your misanthrope, your naughty character, your arrogant or cruel character. But you have to understand what would drive you to become that. And when you do that, you will write with such beautiful compassion that the story will come alive and it will write itself.
Yes, I love that. And one last thing before we wrap up. In one of your chapters, you state storytellers make sense of the chaos around us by ordering the world into meaningful tales. Can you talk about that really quickly and how that connects to also to logos, which you also talk about in the book?
Well, the logos is, yeah, it's not just logic, but it's kind of what you might use as a metaphor, the intelligence of the universe or the mind of God. It has brought into the world all of these experiences and situations for a purpose. And writers and artists let us understand. Let me give you an example. Um, when you're driving through Claiborne Avenue in New Orleans, you're going along underneath a freeway overpass, and there's a large homeless community there. And the average person driving by might think, well, this is unpleasant. They should do something about this homeless community. No, these they live on concrete, and they've painted on the pillars. They've done some graffiti, and they've painted some trees on the pillars of the freeway. And off goes that person driving by, probably full of judgment or full of pity for the people that live there. But a rider driving along that road might see that the neighborhood that used to be there before the freeway overpass was the Treme neighborhood in New Orleans, and it was as it is still a vibrant and beautiful culture, but where that street was a particularly important avenue that connected that community, and it was an artery of life-giving blood for that community, and the freeway destroyed that. And so what I see when I'm driving along Claiborne Avenue is that someone has, I must add, the avenue is filled with these absolutely gorgeous old growth trees, stunning trees in a beautiful center ground, grass covered neutral ground for people to gather and enjoy, sitting there in the cool of the afternoon. And when you are driving along that, what I see is that someone has recreated the neighborhood by painting the trees on the column of um, the freeway, and that this community isn't to be judged poorly or to be pitied. It's to be understood as maintaining the memory and the grandeur of the community that was there. They are holding the memory in their life. They are living memory of that community. And that's how we order uh, from chaos. We order something meaningful. Now, that is not to ignore the homeless people. It is to find out what they need, to be grateful and thank them for what they've done, their role, and then what is it that they need to, in their moment of life. But you see what I'm saying?
Yes, I do. That and I love that illustration because that definitely it does. It speaks to exactly how a writer would approach something compared to how others might look at it. So yeah, it is. It's totally different.
It's the poetic majesty of life. It is seeing the balance of the world and giving meaning to what might be judged as not meaningful. That's why we turn to stories. We turn trying to find comfort and understanding, recognition, and meaning out of what's bewildering and painful.
Definitely. I absolutely love that. I love that. Well, Dr. Denhart, thank you so much for being our guest today. How can listeners get a copy of the book? How can they connect with you? All that good stuff.
Well, thank you for asking me. First, I want to say that at the last Sunday of the month at 3 o'clock Eastern Time at noon Pacific Time, we do an open, free literary salon you can find through Meetup. Is called Writing for the Soul of the World. And we do an hour where we talk about these things. We just have a great, funny, warm, philosophical conversation about writing. So that's one way you can keep abreast of it. You can also download some free chapters of the book on the publishing website, The Invisible Press, there. And you can find this book, please, at your local independent bookstore. These are the big heroes of literature in the world, and they're really under a lot of pressure to stay afloat. Any local independent bookstore can get this book for you, The Universal Grammar of Story. The subtitle is An Author's Guide to Writing for the Soul of the World. And we also have a workbook that goes along with it to help you make sense if you're stuck on a story or need some inspiration or just need to be pulled out of the snowbank of thought. The workbook will help you. And if you want to do something playful and challenging, there's also a game where you can either struggle with your own strategies to try to build a story based on the game movement, or you can throw a roll of dice and let the dice write the story for you. So I thank you for letting me speak to these beautiful creative minds out there. I want to say, I want to reiterate that writing is not a choice. Storytelling is a destiny, and your story will find you one way or another. It will find you because it needs to be expressed, and it isn't for you. The world around you needs what you have to say. So, whether you're published or not published, whether you're 17 or 90, what you're writing is important to the world. It is part of the destiny that our time, our era needs.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
I absolutely love that. Uh, Thank you again. Wow, this has just been so enlightening and just so rich and full of just some amazing literary gems. And I thank you for sharing that with us. Listeners, as always, keep winning at writing. And until next time, everyone be blessed. Bye for now.
Bye.